hopefully we all know something about this historical figure, but do we know enough? Here to fill us in is Keith.
Did I wait long enough? That wasn't exactly the title of the speech, but it was what it was about, but it doesn't matter. I have a trick question for you. James Monroe. This is the man I think you probably know something about, maybe not enough about. We'll find out. He was the 5th President of the United States. Before that, long before that, he fought gallantly as an officer in the Revolutionary War and was wounded in the Battle of Trenton. Went on to become a U.S. Senator. Then he was governor of Virginia 4 times. He was re-elected twice to be 3-time governor, and that was the limit. And then he was elected again another time. He was emissary to France under President Thomas Jefferson. And he was, under President James Madison, he was Secretary of State, and then he later also became Secretary of War at the same time. He served 2 secretaryships simultaneously. This was during the War of 1812, in which Americans distinguished themselves by attempting to occupy Canada, where they were driven out by the Galloping Blue Bows, among other people. And then finally, he was a 2-term president of the United States. Now here's my question. What was his accomplishment that had the greatest effect on the United States? Do I have any takers?
The Monroe Doctrine.
Monroe Doctrine. Thank you, Ron. That is the wrong answer. But nice try. The Monroe Doctrine was certainly a notable accomplishment, although it didn't have much effect during his particular term in office. That is, it wasn't tested.
Could you give us a hint?
Pardon?
Could you give us a hint?
Well, it was prior to his service as President of the United States. And it was during his time as a special envoy to France at the request of Thomas Jefferson.
Louisiana Purchase.
You got it. A Louisiana Purchase.
Good for you.
And this happened in a very odd way. Thomas Jefferson sent Monroe to Paris to negotiate for the sale of New Orleans. Now you've got to understand that at the time America was occupied by a number of countries other than the United States, that is, parts of it were. And France had Louisiana Territory, as it was then known. So Jefferson wanted Monroe to purchase New Orleans. Why New Orleans? It was a port, the mouth of the Mississippi, through which 3,000 ships passed every year, and was responsible for, in Jefferson's words, 3/8 of America's commerce. We wanted to control that port. So he gave Monroe mandate of anywhere from $2 to $10 million, the lowest he could possibly get it for, to buy this port, but also to buy West Florida from Spain. West Florida? Florida at that time had been divided by the British, which previously owned it, into East Florida and West Florida. Well, it turned out that instead of doing as he had been instructed, Monroe, acting with the Robert Livingston, who was the envoy, the ambassador to France, bought the whole of the Louisiana Territory for $15 million. Nobody had given them any authority to do that. Now I want you to take a look at something here. If you would pass this down, pass this down. This, by the way, is a 10 to 12 minute speech. I say that because I see the green light coming. You will see that the Louisiana Territory bears no relation in size to the state of Louisiana as we know it today. It's a huge amount of land. In fact, with the acquisition of the Louisiana Territory, the United States doubled its size. More than 800,000 square miles for $15 million, which came to approximately 2 cents an acre. That's pretty cheap. So at first there was considerable ruckus about this when Congress learned what had happened without any authorization, but eventually they got to like the idea. Now, then Monroe went on afterwards to the presidency, as we know. And his presidency was in sharp contrast to the presidencies which had preceded his, namely Jefferson and Madison. Because those presidencies were racked with turmoil. Political parties were beginning to grow. George Washington had seen this start to happen, and he was very disturbed. He didn't think there should be political parties. I think he was right. But they had become so disorganized that by Monroe's time of Monroe's presidency, they were impotent. So things were pretty quiet during his presidency, and he was very popular. He decided during his first term that he would do as Washington had done, travel about the country, visit the different towns, meet the people, find out what their concerns were, reassure them as well as he could that they were in good hands. And he decided to do this as a private citizen, with the trappings, that is, not of the presidency, but of a private citizen, dressing plainly, traveling by coach or horseback, not a big retinue. He planned to stay at inns, public houses. But that did not come about, because as soon as people got wind of the fact that he was coming to their town, they turned out by the thousands. And they insisted on putting him up in their best homes and so on. So he gave up that idea, but he was welcomed wherever he went. His presidency was called the era, E-R-A, of good feelings. And that's what it was. He was reelected almost unanimously. That one elector refused to cast his vote for Monroe because it was said at the time he wanted Washington's record to be unblemished as the only president who was unanimously elected. So that deprived Monroe of of that honor. But at any rate, he was re-elected almost unanimously, and had a very good 2 terms in office. Among other things, he had not gotten Florida in his original mission, but he got it during his presidency with the help of General Andrew Jackson, who galloped in there with his troops pretty much on his own and sort of bullied Spain into giving up the territory to us. And one other thing I'd like to mention is that his wife, Elizabeth, was the early version of a Jackie Kennedy. She was beautiful, she was gracious, she installed fine silverware and other accoutrements in the White House, entertained beautifully, even though she was racked with arthritis, terrible pain for a good deal of her adult life. And so, and she was a courageous woman. When the wife of the Marquis de Lafayette, who'd been a heroic supporter of America in its Revolutionary War, fighting on our side, went back to France, he fell into disfavor with the government there and had to flee to Austria, but his wife was captured and imprisoned for 15 months, during which time his wife's mother and grandmother were executed from that same prison. So she was summoned at one point by officials and thought that she was going to her own execution. Instead, there was Elizabeth Monroe, who had come to give her her freedom, which had been negotiated with the French government. But she went in the face of mobs and all kinds of turmoil and the bloodbath that was going on in France at that time. And that was an act of great courage. Finally, Monroe died, and here's an interesting coincidence. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, the second and third presidents of the United States, both died on the same July 4th, within hours of each other. And they were great friends at the time. James Monroe died 5 years later on July 4th. An interesting, somewhat bizarre coincidence. Well, there we have maybe a little more than most of us, certainly myself included, might have known about James Monroe until I did some research and came up with what I hope you'll find were some interesting facts.